Well, hello again from Newcastle United's training ground. I've just been with Eddie Howe for his pre-match press conference this morning, where, as you can imagine, a lot of the questions were to do with incoming Premier League rule changes, questions which Eddie Howe tried his best not to answer. That won't stop us. We'll still have a good chat about it later. I'll tell you exactly what Eddie said, and I'll tell you what I think too. Okay, see you soon. Okay, here we are back on the streets of Gosforth. Now, what has happened? Well, this goes back to two stories broken by the Daily Mail this week, which I'll put on screen now. But further than that, it goes back to last Friday when Dan Ashworth, Newcastle United sporting director, met with us reporters at the club's training ground. During that chat, he was asked the question, can Newcastle sign players from Saudi Arabia in January? And Dan said, yes, currently, followed by a pause. Now, the pause that hung in the air suggested to us guys in the room that something was about to change. As a reporter, I made it my job during the days that followed to find out exactly what he meant by that and what would or could be happening. On Wednesday night, I had confirmation, and again, this is a story broken exclusively on the Mail, that on November 21st at the next Premier League shareholders meeting, that is when all 20 clubs get together, a proposal would be put forward to fast track a ban on incoming loan signings between related party associates clubs. You know, in layman's terms, clubs, teams with the same owners, which would mean Newcastle United being unable to bring in players from Saudi Arabian owned PIF clubs. The name that was mentioned as an obvious example was Ruben Neves. Now, Eddie Howe has admitted to us this morning that he likes Ruben Neves as a player. We knew, we reported it a while back that we were monitoring him when he was at Wolves. But if the vote goes the way we expect, and that would mean 14 of the 20 clubs voting in favour of the temporary ban, Newcastle would not be able to trade with those Saudi Arabian clubs. Now, on top of that, the story which we broke yesterday was that there'll be another vote, and this vote is with regards related party commercial deals. Now, at present, Newcastle have partnerships on the front of the shirt with Seller, on the sleeve with Noon. They've of course got the airline agreement as well with Saudi Airlines. So those already exist. But under changes going forward, Newcastle would have to prove that they had multiple offers of the same value for that to be signed off under the Premier League's fair market value tests. So, for example, they get a £25 million offer from Seller per year for the front of shirt sponsorship. They've got to prove there are 2 or 3 or several other firms, companies who would be willing to also pay £25 million. Now, where does this differ from other clubs? Well, this only relates to related party sponsorship agreements. So it would be Newcastle and Saudi Arabian firms or firms attached to PIF, Manchester City and Abu Dhabi, for example. But no doubt the timing of it and the timing of the other rule with regards to the loans certainly feels as if this is aimed more so towards Newcastle United. Now, what did Eddie say this morning? He said he couldn't comment really on it, and trust us, we tried. At one point I said, listen Eddie, I apologise, I'm going to ask you the same question in a slightly different way, to which he said, well Craig, I'm going to give you the same answer in a slightly different way. So we really did, as a pack, so to speak, go after Eddie on this in the nicest possible way. Well, I'm going to put the story on screen which we've wrote from this now, and you know, the crux of that was that he admitted he would be open to bringing in players from Saudi. He also invited us to speculate as to the motivation behind it. He said he couldn't, that was our job. So, okay Eddie, we'll take you up on that challenge. What do I think is the motivation? Undoubtedly, the motivation is to restrict Newcastle United from top flight rivals. I'm not going to mention the names of the clubs because I know one or two of them are a little bit litigious. I remember writing a story last year, and the very next day I had a phone call from one of those clubs talking about the prospect of legal action if I didn't change some of the wording in the story I'd written. Anyway, that's an entirely different matter. Yeah, you can name that. I'm turning it to Eddie here. You name the clubs, you speculate as to which clubs it is who are leading this, but they bring the motion. It's then put in front of all 20 members, and what we expect is, and what Newcastle expect is, that at least 14 of the 20 votes needed will pass both of these motions. What is the motivation? One, to stop Newcastle going into the Saudi market and bringing in the likes of Neves, or there's others there that could go for, you know, centre half have got a problem, Emerick Laporte, players out there, N'Golo Kante, Ronaldo and Neymar, that wouldn't go down that route, but you get the point, Alexander Mitrovic. There is a ready stockpile of players there. Now, the second part of it with regards to the sponsorship deals, now, that for me, I'm going to give you my opinion here. I can understand the first one on the loans. I necessarily don't think it's right that, and I'm talking generally here, clubs can have multiple owners, a multiple club network, and they can have a stockpile of players who they can then bring in, or that they can then, trade with. I think it's right that the Premier League ultimately do something to shut the door on that, but they should have done it long ago. It's only become an issue now because you've got owners with two clubs with good players. It wasn't an issue with Manchester City and Melbourne, or the network of clubs they had. There's 11 clubs in the Premier League who have got owners with interests and with part or majority stakes elsewhere. So only now has it become apparent, and only now is it being pushed through because of Newcastle United. Is it right that something is done about it? Yes. I think it is, but then on the flip side of that, why should only Newcastle United be barred from dealing with Saudi clubs? When you've seen Chelsea, it's been very convenient for them this summer to sell players to Saudi Arabia, what I would say are probably inflated fees. Liverpool have done well out of it, others have too, and will continue to do so. Why should Newcastle United be blocked from doing that? From what I understand, yes, it's only loan deals at the moment. Going forward, I think they're going to look at all manner of deals, permanent transfers in and out. For example, the Alan Saint-Maximin deal in the summer, what Newcastle had to prove was fair market value. They were able to prove that. St-Max went for around £20 million, which you would say is fair, but then other clubs might look at it and say, well, if there weren't any other buyers at the time, £20 million is more than zero, and it was a convenient sale for Newcastle because it did unlock their ability, as Eddie said, to then go and do other business. So I get it. I know you guys are Newcastle supporters, and this is a channel for Newcastle United news, but I'm trying to give I'm not biased. I'm never biased. I'm trying to give a balanced opinion here, and I think something does have to be done to look at this. But at the same time, 100%, I think the motivation of others is to, this is aimed at Newcastle United, and I do think they've got a legitimate case when it comes to questioning the legality of it. Certainly with regards the second one, the sponsorship. It's not normal work in business practice. Say you put your house on the market, and I was on Sky last night talking about this, and my wife must have had anything better to do. She was in the other room watching me, and afterwards we had the conversation. My wife's a lawyer, and I'd mentioned competition law, and she said, what do you know about competition law? I said, well, actually not a lot, but it sounded good on Sky, but I probably will learn a lot more about it over the coming weeks and months. And I explained the situation to her, and I said, if Newcastle agree a shirt sponsorship deal, for example, for £5 million, they've then got to go out, and if it was a Saudi company, and get 2 or 3 others who say, yeah, I'll pay £5 million too. That's just not normal work in business practice. And the example I used with her, and she said, no, you've got a point. First time she's agreed with me on something in a long time, was if we put our house on the market, for example, say £100,000, you put your house on the market, £200,000, whatever it is, put a house on the market for that amount, and you get someone who comes along who's willing to pay the asking price. They like the house, they want that, there you go, £200,000. For you to sell that house, you then don't have to go out and find 3 or 4 other buyers to prove to the bank that they were willing to pay £200,000, do you? No, it's just not normal. And that's the same in business. Newcastle might strike a deal with a company, albeit a Saudi company, who want their name on the front of the shirt and are willing to pay what could be deemed as fair market value. The seller deal at £25 million is still £15 million below Arsenal, below Spurs. It's less than half what Manchester City have got. It's the 6th biggest in the Premier League for a club who finished 4th last year. They were able to prove it was fair market value. Again, that was another rule which was brought in after the takeover in 2021. Now it looks like it's going to be mandatory that they've got to go out and prove that there are others willing to pay the same price, and that for me is, I think that's difficult. I don't think it's necessarily fair, and I think Newcastle will probably have a legal challenge on that. And yeah, my wife's the authority on this. She agrees. Now, there is a football match, of course, this weekend as well, and we eventually did get round to talking about that with Eddie down at Bournemouth tomorrow. Sadly, I won't be there. My wife is away for the weekend, and I've got my 3 little boys, which will be a lot harder than going down to Bournemouth. Trust me. I've said to my oldest one, he's got to be my Jason Tyndall this weekend. I need a right-hand man. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you, but anyway, he understood. And the big news to come out of that with regards fitness and availability tomorrow, which is the first go-to talking point with Eddie these days, was Callum Wilson. Wilson will have tests today on the hamstring strain or tightness which forced him off at Dortmund on Tuesday night. I don't think Newcastle particularly want Wilson to go away with England either, I must admit, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him on the bench at most tomorrow and then potentially withdrawn from the England squad. We'll have to wait and see then. Other quick updates for you. Sven Botman has been in training. Yeah, that would have been good news for Newcastle. No, Sven Botman has been in Holland getting specialist treatment on his knee. They're still no closer to a return date. That doesn't sound good. Matt Targett's had the surgery, 3-month hamstring. Jacob Murphy's surgery, shoulder, 3 months as well. And the other one, Harvey Barnes is back out running. He could be back now. We thought he was going to be out until around Christmas time. It looks like before Christmas he could be back playing. That's a huge boost given the problems. And Alexander Isak, everything is just on track like we said it would be to return after the international break. Eddie went along with that this morning. Don't be surprised to see him start up front tomorrow. But no, he said Isak's building up his load and it'll be the first game back, which is Chelsea, of course, after the international break. I will actually be away with England during this break, hopefully not reporting on Kieran Trippier or Callum Wilson injuries anyway, but we'll have lots of videos during that period as well. Now, on the game tomorrow, I think it's one that they've got to go there and win. Bournemouth are a team in the bottom three. We're seeing how competitive it is getting at the very top of the table now. Newcastle had a good weekend last weekend with a victory over Arsenal, others dropping points. I think they've got to go and follow that up at Bournemouth. The suggestion that Newcastle can go then maintain the unbeaten run. I'm sorry, I think it was 2 points dropped at Wolves. I think it was on reflection 2 points dropped at West Ham as well. And even though they're patched up, and this brings me back to the point after Dortmund, I want to revisit this because after Dortmund in my video I said that I thought Newcastle were better than what they showed. Now, some of the responses, not all the responses, but some of the responses, and there was a narrative emerged that, got to be more positive. Newcastle were patched up, they've got injuries, there's loads of excuses. Eddie isn't saying that. He didn't say that on Tuesday, and he deliberately made the point again today. He said, doesn't matter how many players they've got out, they're better than what they showed over 2 games against Dortmund. That was the point I was making, and in many ways it's not negative, it's a positive, it's a compliment. I've said from the start I think Newcastle were good enough to emerge from that Champions League group. Are there mitigating factors? So many. Is it criticism? No, it's just the point that yes, with more players available, I think Newcastle probably would have beaten Dortmund, but even so, I don't think they should be offering up excuses, and that was Eddie's point again there today. They've got to be better than they were on Tuesday night, and I think they will be better again tomorrow at Bournemouth, because as they've shown, their form in the Premier League recently has been very good. Dortmund are the only team to beat them in the last 13 matches. Again, that supports the point, even though to the backdrop of all these suspensions, injuries, Tonali, Barnes, everything like that, they're still playing well and they're still on a good run. So yeah, guys. Quickly on that as well. This is something a lot of you guys have asked me recently. I've responded in comments below to say Yankuba Minte. I've said that I checked this out a couple of weeks ago. They do have a recall clause in all loans, but the indication was that they prefer to leave players out to continue with the development that was the plan at the start of the season. Eddie was asked about that this morning and said that they will make a decision only in January. Now, surprise, surprise, I didn't know this until earlier. Yankuba Minte is currently injured. He's out with a muscle problem. So yeah, I think that's one to revisit in 5 or 6 weeks' time. But certainly the impact he's made at Feyenoord, we've all seen the clips. He looks exciting. Newcastle are going to go to Bournemouth tomorrow without what looks like, if Wilson doesn't make it, they're a winger shy. The position he plays. We were just talking amongst ourselves after the press conference there. Who will go on the left wing if Joe Linton comes back into midfield? Bruno suspended, of course. Well, you're talking Matt Ritchie, or does Livramento go up there again? Livramento on the wing didn't really work for me. So yeah, they are stretched, and I think they'll be given serious consideration to Minte coming back, even though they would prefer it to be otherwise. Anyway, guys, like I said a few moments ago, I'll be away with England next week. I will check in. I'm here, there, and everywhere. Macedonia, calling via different countries, 7 flights in 6 days. So yeah, we'll maybe have a little bit of a Newcastle Q&A during that time, like I did when I was in Seville with Scotland last month. Thank you again for watching, guys. All the links are below to all of the stories I've just mentioned. Please hit like, subscribe and comment, and I'll see you again soon. Okay, thanks again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Bye bye.